My name is Corey Roc Bottom Davis. I am a comic artist and writer. One of my titles is Jet Boy. And we are in the process now of converting the comic version of Jet Boy into animated Jet Boy, which adds to my list of titles, animation director. And this is like my first time venturing into that realm, but I am in good hands as far as guidance goes. So, pretty much that's the long and short of my duties. For the most part, I'm pretty old school. I like the feel of being at a drawing table, drafting table, um, with my pens, my pencils, the markers, all the old school stuff. And I incorporate a bit of the new school by scanning those images in and then taking the digital approach from there. I know it's a bold new world for this old man, so I'm just looking at a lot of my peers who have made the transition from the drafting table to the tablet, and I've worked with it a few times, but I'm just too set in my old school ways to just make the complete leap from paper to tablet. So I still, work in that, you know, area, but on certain projects, like with the animation aspect, I work alongside a lot of people who are a lot more seasoned than I am in the realm of animation. So I try to do a lot of the digital to accommodate them. And then when I'm doing my comic books, I'm just back to old school tactics and methods and what I call my weapons of war, which are the pencils and the inks and the pens and such. So that's pretty much the difference in you know, how I approach things. My influences between like childhood me and adult me, which I use the term adult very loosely, because of those influences, because they're still there and they, as you can see, they're present. I have a lot of influences. I grew up on comics at a time where there was a shortage. Excuse me, run that back. I grew up in a time of comics where there was a shortage of characters of color, and this was at a time where we had a Black Panther. There was a time that we had a Luke Cage, even the original Captain Marvel. You know what I mean? So with all of these characters of color, and I jump in, around the late '80s, and they're very much like absent from the narrative, and they're not being used as or pushed to the forefront as their white counterparts. So it took a while, and then I guess in the early '90s there was that big boom, and then we got Static, and then we got Hardware and Tribe, and so many faces of color across the board in the realm of comics. And a lot of those images and artists that brought those characters to the table are very big influences for me. I remember being uh, seeing Uncanny X-Men. I think it was number 248, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it was either 248, 247, somewhere in that era, that I was introduced to the works of Jim Lee. And I saw Jim Lee's stuff, and I was just like, yeah, this is what I want to do for a living. I want to do this. But even to take it further back than that, I remember being a kid growing up, watching anything that Hanna-Barbera had their stamp on: Scooby-Doo, Flintstones, Jabberjaw. you can, the animation aspect. So while my peers at that point, like when I was about 5 or 6 years old, were concerned about collecting the merchandise attached to those characters, I was like, how do they make these drawings move? Because I had enough common sense about myself to understand that, they were drawings. And I wanted to know what, you know, the process on how they made these drawings come to life. So there are a lot of influences for me. There are guys like Brian Stelfreeze, Alex Toth, Jim Lee, who I mentioned before, Akira Toriyama. So many different artists from so many different backgrounds that put a little flavor into the game and got my attention so much that I'm just like, yeah, this is where I want to be amongst these guys. Even if I don't surpass them, I at least want to be able to say I was influenced by them, because you feel like you'll never be in the same class as these guys. But then, like, people like my dad and my mom, of course, and my other mentors outside of my family were always pushing to say, you don't have to be like these guys. You don't have to be better than these guys. You just need to choose a lane of your own and just kind of stay in it and make that your own. So I was fortunate enough to get that type of guidance, and those influences have remained, and they are definitely not just still a big part of my creative process, they're a part of my life in general. So I support whatever they put out, and I just take in everything that they have to give, and that's just not just from the product aspect, but just from the knowledge of how they work, their techniques, everything. And it's a big part of what I do. I think with how times have changed and we were introduced to the realm of social media, it made it a lot more simple for us to gain access to these influences and be able to sit down and, like, not only take in what these artists are giving us, but it gives us a lane to even step into their world a bit. Just like sitting here having this conversation via the computer, via the internet, it's the exact same approach you would take if you were sitting down with either of them and picking their brain. And it helps a lot, actually. And outside of that, I'm somebody who doesn't really take social media that serious. I just I'm on there joking all day. I say what I gotta say. I connect with who I need to connect to, and then I move along. But outside of that, I use it as a tool to connect with those people that are grounded or rooted in those influences that drive me and drive my work. Um, and you know, outside of that, I try to keep it simple, not too complicated. Man, 2020 as a whole can suck it. I mean, I'm done with 2020, man. It's just like everybody. 2020. Actually, I was thinking about this not long ago. I was talking with another creator buddy of mine, and 2020 could be that blessing in disguise that we need. Of course, we hate 2020, but take a look at the revelation we've had with 2020. Not just with the politics of 2020, but just like personally, there's a lot of masks being dropped across the board. There's so many different things, man, that 2020 have just kind of dropped into our laps that some of us were ready to face and some of us weren't. And it was just like when I mentioned before, like with social media, even like it could be used for the greater good of mankind, or it could be weaponized to be the worst thing ever. It's just in that realm, you just have to get in where you fit in and find your space and be true to that space unapologetically. And with 2020, we are all being put to that test when it comes to that and just other realms of media. I mean, we have the biggest clown in the White House right now. I mean, I think Dave Chappelle said it best that the country is being run by the biggest internet troll that we've seen. I mean, and that's probably that's the greatest description I could say as far as that leadership goes. And with the pandemic and everything, and how that was handled or mishandled, I should say. And this pandemic and just 2020 overall, just the events that took place were just all just a world full of people being dealt a bad hand, especially when it comes to us minorities, and having to say that Black Lives Matter is something that should be common sense to most, but it's not. And that in itself is a job, trying to convince people that our lives matter at the same level as theirs. And being out there at the protests, I was out there at the protests. I had the tear gas fired at me. I had the rubber bullets shot. And I've seen my friends out there injured by a lot of what these officers were doing to peaceful protesters. And I've seen the outside instigators come in and take their roles in making us look like animals and such. That's their job, to do that. And we had to stand up to those folks however we saw fit. And a lot of us chose to be out there on the front line of protests, but then a lot of us chose other ways to express ourselves and express our frustrations. So a lot of us chose to pick up the pens and go to work, and pick up our tablets and go to work, and make our statements and make our voices heard. And I think that is one of the few things of beauty to come out of 2020, is the fact that it allowed a lot of us, especially minorities, to come forward and have this platform to speak our truths on. And we have different ways of speaking those truths. And we utilized every single way that we could possibly use to tell people that we matter in some way, shape, or form, especially when it comes to the media. Like, we've used our comics, we've used our animations, we used every bit of what we could use to express ourselves. And I would say that with this year being the crap show that it is, that was a way for us to exercise our right to speak and make our voices heard, and using those platforms to amplify those voices. So I think that, given the hardship that came along with 2020, it's just like 2020 in the saying, hindsight is always 2020. So when you think about 2020, in 2021, in 2022, think about how 2020 brought forth the revelation that a lot of us needed when it came to certain aspects. And the fact that it does suck that I have to wear a mask to go get a pizza, but I'm going to wear a mask to go get a pizza. I'm not going to be stupid about it, but it's just taking the information that is given to you and how you exercise that information, how you apply that information, I should say, to your everyday life and how you benefit from it. And at least try to salvage 2020 for something positive, for however you can. Whatever you can get out of this mess that is 2020, take it and use it, if nothing else, as a learning experience. When I think about what's next, and I have this motto that I go by. Sorry, I'm dropping stuff. I have this motto that I use as far as what's next, and that's just simply move forward. You got to keep pushing and you got to keep moving forward. You can't let certain aspects of life, especially when it comes to this year is just filled with roadblocks. Like, I had plans on doing XYZ that just come to a screeching halt at the early part of the year. Now here we are approaching the end, and a lot of things had to be shifted around. A lot of things had to be reconstructed. A lot of things had to be rethought. A lot of things, the planning had to be redone. But I can say honestly now, at this point, we are at a point where we can move forward comfortably. I can move forward comfortably, personally, business wise, all of those things, because that um, it takes stepping back and looking at everything for what it is and accepting certain things and having to restructure your life, whether it's, like I said, personal or business wise, to pretty much fit that model to move forward and to gain some type of positivity out of this otherwise negative time that we're living in right now. So I'm not going to let it drag me down so much, because it's beat me down so much. I mean, given what we've seen this year, this is a time where we watched a black man be executed publicly. We still don't have justice for Breonna Taylor. We have so many things to beat us down. And when we express ourselves in whatever platform we use, a lot of stuff gets silenced because there's more stuff that gets dumped on top of it. And that's the hard part, and trying to navigate those seas. And thinking about navigating those seas personally and business wise, when you're so emotionally invested into the imagery and the cases that are popping up all over the country in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah, it's insane. So you have to step back, take a look at all of these things, and just find your way to move forward. Find a way to navigate these seas, because they are very troubled. These are very troubled times we're living in. And we have to be there for one another and help each other, because our support system that we have, that if it's not set into place, then we must build that support system. And we should be able to look to one another for that type of support, because we need it in these times. And when I say move forward, it means move forward together, because that's the only way we're going to get to wherever it is that we're going. We have to have good navigators. We have to have a good crew on our side to help us find a way through these troubled waters and get to the other side. So move forward is my motto, and I share that same method with everybody that I can share it with. No matter how troubled these times are, find your way to move forward.